cozy today in the same location. How fun is this? All right, so we're talking about chapters 5 through 7 in our book Authentic. So, quick recap. First four chapters kind of introduced what being authentic means. Chapter 1 went into you can only go as far as your worth, and then you have to figure out where your worth is. Where does your worth come from? So, this book, and I guess both of our belief systems, says our worth comes from God.
Yep.
And so figuring out who you are in relationship to God the Father can really help you understand, I guess, from a different perspective or a different spiritual angle, that it's not about what you do here on earth. It's not about the job you have. It's not about the people you know. More so, it's about how deep you go within yourself, your values, what matters to you the most. So from there, we went into the peculiar package and being your unique self, that nobody can do what you were created and designed and are meant to do. All you can do is be the best you and you win. So this third chapter we were talking about, or it helped you understand like kind of what some of those cognitive distortions are, like the you're too bossy, you're too nice, you're not enough, you're not this, you're too that. I don't know, all the crazy things that people like to say that make them uncomfortable because you're different from them. So they want to point their finger at you and say you're the reason why they're uncomfortable. We talked about that at church today. Becoming comfortably uncomfortable. And then, so yeah, just be you and win. The fourth chapter went into how to unlock your identity. And then today we are talking about first embracing being the underdog. So anything that stands out to you, what did you find helpful or interesting about being the underdog?
Okay, so I will start on something I highlighted. Life is a journey that requires patience, strength, trust in God, and a commitment to development. Admittedly, not good at all of those things. You have,
Pause.
okay,
She's reading page 84 right here at the top.
good
We
details.
also have it
Okay, highlighted.
highlighted. Yes, so
We didn't
continue.
plan that. And then you have to trust that God will help you become everything you need to fulfill your destiny. And I think that is where I get caught up, because when I get stuck in a cycle of anxiety or worry, I forget that it's not my job to solve my problems, or at least things that are beyond my doggos.
Trigger's gonna take my seat.
Yeah, we have some special guests. Here they come.
They'll make their way in when they're ready to.
Um, but yeah, like there are some things that I forget that are out of my control, and I spend a lot of time dwelling on them. So,
Yeah.
patience, strength, trust in God, and a commitment to development. But also, I think just remembering that if I'm worrying about it, I'm not trusting God, and that's not where I want to be. So,
I think a long time ago, I heard a mentor in a group that I was in, a ladies group that I was in, where she said, if you have time to worry about it, then you have time to pray about it.
I have heard that too.
And worrying is praying for the things that you don't want to happen.
Yeah.
So, what is your focus on? Are you focused on the outcome of which you desire? Are you focused on the solution, or how I can, learn and grow and develop from this experience? Or do you get hooked on the problem and all the things that the problem, all the feelings that the problem brings up,
Oh my
all of
gosh.
the people and the memories that the problem brings up? Or can you really just hone in on and say, all right, so that was a problem in my life. What did I learn from it? And how did it help me grow? How does it shape me? What can I do differently? How can I be different to get a better or an outcome that I guess you're looking for?
Yeah.
So this chapter, God uses, God uses
He
the
used the
book of,
chapter.
God used David, but the author, David, uses the story
Did
of
it play
King
music or?
David, but um and how he was the underdog,
Hmm.
the kid that nobody invited to even come to the war. They kind of just left him behind, and then
Hmm.
he's the kid who shows up, brings food to his brothers and everybody. He's like, "What's going on? What's the problem here?" And in that moment, when everybody else was afraid to face the Philistine giant, David already knew who he was. He had already been battling with, I think this says lions and bears and other big animals,
Hmm.
to where he knew what his strength was. God equipped him to defeat those, beasts in the jungle or in the wild desert, I guess, over there. But so when he was faced with the Philistine, instead of putting on the armor and fighting the war and the battle the way that most people back then knew how to fight a war or a battle,
Hmm.
he was like, no, this isn't going to work for me. My weapon is a sling and stones. So let me just do this my way. God's already equipped me. I'm not afraid of you. I'm going to get this done. My God's bigger than you. And his faith is what brought him to success, doing the thing that seemed impossible, where everybody was probably looking at him, pointing, laughing, mocking him. Probably all of the guys,
Yeah,
all of the grown
because
men
he
in the
was
war who were
little.
too afraid, all of the narcissists out there that love to belittle and minimize, were probably laughing at him like, oh, what is he going to do with the stone? You're going to throw that stone and kill him? And David was like, yeah, I am. What's your problem? So to me, what it reminds me so much of is when God showed me, like, on this path of where I'm leading you, you're going to have people that are going to try to tear you apart. You're going to have people
Hmm.
trying to stop you. And it's not the people, we have an adversary, our enemy, uses people to trip us up. And so when I stopped looking at people as the problem and I started looking at them as the puppet being mastered by somebody or
Hmm.
something, I stopped being so defensive to the person and wanting to attack them. And instead, I was like, you know what? Instead of me defending myself to the accusations or the criticism or whatever it is that they were throwing at me, I learned how to say, this is how maybe you perceive it, but this is my perception.
Hmm.
This is how I feel or think about it.
Hmm.
This is my experience. These are my intentions. And then we are focused from an I perspective, right? I can only control me, like you said a minute ago.
Hmm.
I get all worked up when I start realizing I'm trying to control things out of my control. That is all anxiety is trying to control something that's outside of your control. You're worried about something that you can't control. You don't know what the outcome is. You can't predict the future,
Hmm.
but every part of you is trying to.
Hmm.
And so it's creating this emotional, this stress reaction in your body, and then, it's like, oh, I'm just so anxious about everything. You're not. You're choosing to be because you're choosing to try to control something outside of your control, or you're
Yep.
choosing to try to predict something that you can't predict instead of saying, you know what, whatever's going to be is going to be. This is how I know how to do things from my strength. This is what I know God's calling me to do. So whatever I can't do in my strength, I trust that He's going to do in the supernatural realm of things.
And Bethany says, "Ooh, I love that."
Oh, thanks, Bethany.
So going back a little bit, because you were talking about how everyone's saying they're laughing and mocking David. And one of the things that I think I have wrestled with for a long time is because I have, well, um, I've always had a hard time. I'm a little bit slower of a processor. And when I was in school and like growing up and going into college and all those things, I had to work a little bit harder than everybody else. So like some of the things within my mind don't work like they normally should. And I remember feeling
According to who? The
like,
experts and professionals that say you're not working
right,
as well as you should, but God's like, but I created you exactly
uh-huh,
the way I want you to
agree,
be. So work within your realm,
right.
become great at what you're great at.
Well, and that's, yeah, that's where I was thinking like I have gone from it, and that was an attitude that I had to just get over because like I have
How did you get
taken,
over it?
I just stopped believing people. I stopped
Okay.
listening, and because, and it was one of those things too, but if you hear it enough times and you're just like, but I know that I've been successful so far doing it however it is that I'm doing it. I don't know if any of this
So
makes
you're
sense.
saying that you had a former belief system that I can do something, I'm strong, I know who I am, and then over the course of time, people said little tiny microaggressive things to you that kind of
Hmm.
chipped away at your self-esteem or at your
Or I've tried
confidence.
to. And
Hmm.
so, luckily for me, God also gave me pride. And
God does not give us pride.
okay, someone did. But my stubbornness came down to it, and when they were, I don't know, maybe whatever we could, maybe that's a session for another time. But
We might get to that later in the book.
I didn't let all of it affect me. Sometimes, yes, but then I also recognized in myself that if they would say I couldn't, maybe this is like oppositional defiance disorder. If you say I can't, I said,
I'm
well,
gonna
I'm
do
going to go
it.
out
I'm
and
gonna
do
do
it. Exactly. But like some of that has driven me. But my point being that a lot of people will look at the outside package and they'll say, well, because you can't understand or do X, Y, or Z, you're not qualified for this.
it. Okay.
And then on the inside, though, I'm like, just because I do it differently doesn't mean that it's wrong,
Right. Yeah.
or because I don't believe what you believe. So there's a verse specifically about David, but the Lord said to Samuel, do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. And that was talking about his older brother. He was
Yes. Who
handsome and
was the
strong
perfect
and
everything for
like
the role. Yeah.
big and muscly, and he wears the armor and he looks good. But they're basically hiding David in a closet at this point, and his dad presents all the brothers to go into battle. Here's all your options.
All 9 of them.
Yes.
Don't worry about the 10th one.
He's, the water boy.
Yeah, the water boy.
So, but then God's like, no, that's him. That's the one. And then the verse says, the Lord does not look at things that people look at.
Yep.
And people look at the outward appearances, but the Lord looks at the heart. And so that was a transformative moment for me when I stopped being oppositionally defiant about it. And then I realized that, well, God says differently.
So let's not throw a bunch of
I know.
clinical terms
You're
in there.
right.
So she's being resistant, which is normal. I think it's absolutely necessary for us to have some sort of resistance to change. Um, that's that iron sharpens iron, right?
Mhm.
If we don't have resistance, you're not gonna get stronger. So I think
Mhm.
another example he might have talked about in the book is like trees. And it's even if it's not in the book, this is an example. There's been research studies done that when you plant trees that don't have any external environmental like influence on their growth, they will wither and die.
Mm-hmm.
But the trees that have to fight against the wind and have the natural elements that it puts up a fight against, that's what actually makes it stronger, and it continues to grow into a bigger and stronger tree.
Mm-hmm.
So as people, we want the road of least resistance. And I've been studying this neuroscience. It's not a podcast, but it's like a I don't know, like
It
a
is
course. It's
like
a
an
course.
audible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's Dr. Jordan Peterson started an online university. So one of the courses in it is a 10-hour course on neuroscience and neuroplasticity. And now that I'm going off on a tangent, I'm probably going to forget why you brought this up. But
It's just where we are today.
he talks about how in the brain, when you're trying to create new cognitive pathways, if you don't just have resistance or something that kind of fights against you and pushes against that, then you're not going to create and develop this new cognitive pathway.
Mm-hmm.
And our brain is programmed to do things of least resistance. That's the whole purpose of why I said this.
Okay.
Our brain goes into, protection mode, that fight or flight kicks in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it wants to problem solve and go through everything that you've ever learned and known and experienced in order to give you the path of least resistance. So when we talk about change and making change, people give up because it's hard.
Yeah.
Your brain's like, no, we don't want to go work out every day like this week. That's too hard. We don't want to read that book. I'm tired. Let's just sit on the couch. Like your brain wants the path of least resistance. So any change you're going to make is going to take work. It's going to take perseverance, pushing through, crying, getting frustrated, feeling all of those emotions but it's making a choice every time, and it's not letting the emotion make the decision for you. Instead, it's your values, the
Mm-hmm.
motivation, the outcome that you're seeking, the drive, the discipline. Like that's what's going to keep you focused and arriving at the destination that you're trying to get to. And again, I say this word destination because to me it's like Joyce Meyer said it. She's like every time it was like I overcame the test that I was facing, I'd be like, well, there's another horizon for me to get over. And God's like, yeah, you're always going to have horizons because no matter where you walk, there's always going to be distance in front of you. And he was like, so to me, that was like your destination is just being comfortably uncomfortable, walking with me. We're going on this journey. You don't know what the future is going to hold. You don't know where I'm taking you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you did, you'd probably tell everybody, like, we'll get into Joseph. His story comes later. You know, Joseph, God gave him a dream. And, you know, like the 17-year-old kid he was, he went to his brothers and like, look, I'm going to be the king of the land and everybody's going to bow down to me. And, you know, and then his brothers hated him and they did everything they could to destroy it. So this is, to me, God's like, I don't reveal everything to you because the enemy is going to come in and try to take it from you.
Yeah.
So sometimes I need you to just do with the little that I give you and trust that I'm doing the rest.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get there, you'll know you're there.
Right.
So to me, that is that walk of faith. But
Yep.
yeah, so that was kind of a tangent. Coming back to the Lord chose David. You know, he was an unlikely candidate that his father hadn't even bothered to call him in when parading the rest of his brothers in front of Samuel. So imagine how you would feel if this happened to you. You might feel like your family didn't think much of you, but it doesn't matter what other people think. It only matters what God says. I hear this probably more than anything else when I'm counseling with working with my clients is this, my parents didn't love me, my parents didn't this, my brother's this, my sister's that, they loved them, I was, you know, the problem child, the scapegoat, the whatever. So you got to stop comparing yourself. You have to step out of comparison if you really want to step into your full potential. Because again, like we read in the first 4 chapters, you were created and designed to do something only you can do, something that you're specifically good at, something that you've been gifted to do. So find people that you can collaborate with, work with people who, you know, can share their own unique story and bring it into yours, and you guys can do something together. You know, we come from very, very different backgrounds. You've been doing your mission work for 20 years. I started 13 years ago, and we've just now crossed paths. So it's like, you know, is this like a, oh well, you know, hi, bye, see you later? Or, you know, we took time to figure out like how can we collaborate together? How can you take what you're doing and you're really good at, where I don't have to do any of that stuff, but I can take what I'm really good at and bring it to the table, and how can we make this bigger and better?
Yep.
And, you know, you go with it. You know, I've been trying to figure out what I'm going to do to build this community, this shattered into one community, which, you know, to me was going to be a safe haven for women and stuff. And now it's starting out where God's like, your community might not look like that. It might not be a cookie cutter neighborhood. Your community might be something that's online, and you teach them how to have their own small groups in their own neighborhoods. But this is going to be a bigger community. So that's way bigger than I ever even imagined. And so, but I'm not like a computer person. I don't want to do editing and video recording. I just want to talk and share and listen. But then, yeah, you come in, you're great at that. And your husband, you know, is great at doing the IT stuff. And then, you know, we meet people who are good at, you know, marketing and all of that. So you take what your skills are and you hone in on, and you just really become an expert, so to speak, in that one area. And then you allow God to bring people in your life, and that's, you know, and he's like, hey, this person right here, I need you to work with them, and this is what you're going to do. And stay in your lane. Don't try to change and try to do their job and be good at, you know, what they're good at. Like, you want to learn, but stay in your lane. Let them be the expert of what they're the expert in, and you just do what you do and trust that it's all going to work out eventually, as long as you keep communicating with each other and bringing God. You know, if God's the center of it, then it's not about what I want or what you want. You know, our differences can collectively work towards, okay, so, but this is the mission, this is the goal. So how can our differences bring us both to the same place?
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yep, it does.
So,
It does.
that's what
And
I'm
we've
thinking.
figured that out too, but we've done a lot of praying about it. We've done a lot of talking about it. And we're still trying to kind of navigate that,
Oh my gosh, this is such baby beginning stages. I feel like an imposter. Like,
Little
oh
bit
my
of
gosh, so many
imposter
other
syndrome.
people are so great at this. They have such good skills and all that. But
I
I
think
just want it
everybody
to
feels that.
be, I just want it to be real.
Yeah.
Here's the real deal.
I mean,
So,
does it feel real? I mean, I feel like the other thing is too, just again, we talked about this last time, transparency and honesty and just we're taking what we read and how God interprets it in our hearts and sharing that because and that's just two people having a conversation where he also says where two or more are gathered, there I will be. And I'm going to give you inspiration if you don't already
yes.
have it. And that's one of those things where you're learning from each other.
Yeah.
And we're learning from you guys. So I mean, I'm monitoring comments. So please put things in there if you have thoughts. But
But the video is delayed, so
I know,
it's really
I know. I'm trying not to watch myself.
We have to put a tape over that so you can't see it.
Yeah, do you have like a post-it note? I'll figure that out. Like we said, we're new.
No, I don't.
Okay, well.
I do, but this got stuff written on it. But
That's
anyways,
good.
all right.
Well, and then the one other thing I highlighted about this chapter, what matters is that God can use you if you let him. And again, we have free will, so it's one of those things too. Yes, you're given gifts. You're made in a certain way for a certain purpose, but you decide whether or not that's going to happen. You can absolutely say, you know what? Nope, I'm going to chicken out. And you could miss out on something really big. But if you are willing to step into and just, I mean, it's walking on water, it's trusting that God will do what he says when we get to that.
So embrace the underdog. So first, the first thing that it talks about is God has equipped you. You're already equipped. So this goes back to kind of like when I was talking about how, you know, King Saul was like, here, take my armor, David, if you're going to go and kill the Philistine. And David put it on and was like, ugh, none of this fits me. It's so bulky. So he takes it off and he uses the equipment that he's been equipped for. You know, Saul was equipped with a sword and a shield, and he was a gigantic man.
Yep.
And so that's what he was equipped with. That's how he fought. But when we try to fight battles with other people's equipment, when we're equipped to fight that battle the way that God created and equipped us to fight the battle, it can lead to detrimental outcomes. So sometimes other people will try to give us the things they think we need, maybe even things that worked for them. Just like Saul tried to give David his armor, people will try to equip us for our journey the way they were equipped. You should do this. You shouldn't do that. If you ever hear that should word in the therapeutic field, we stay away from that. We tell people they're shoulding all over you when they use those. Don't tell people what they should and shouldn't do because you don't know. You're not God. Like, what do you know? So instead, it's asking questions that build curiosity. That leads to problem solving in your brain going, ooh, let me connect over here. Ooh, let's connect this. Oh, we did that one time. Well, maybe this would work. Well, maybe this over here. But when somebody comes in and they're like, well, you should just blah, 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 your brain's not problem solving anymore. It's like, okay, so how do I make that work? I don't even know how to do that. And now you go down this negative problem focused thought instead of being solution focused, where it's like, well, this is what I'm good at, so this is how I'm going to do it. However it turns out, it's going to turn out. If we can figure out a way to do it better moving forward, great. If not, like, then I'm glad I did it my way.
Yeah.
So what worked for Saul did not and would not work for David. So even when things don't make sense to other people, follow your God-given instincts because they will not steer you wrong. Follow God and you will always find success. And even so, this is another one of those words, success, you know, very subjective. It's, you know, personal. What's successful to one person might not seem successful to another. But when it says you will always find success when you follow God, to me, it's even if it doesn't turn out the way that you're expecting or you're wanting it to, that doesn't mean that God didn't make that experience successful. That doesn't mean it's not going to be successful in the future. A lot of times, I think the shortcomings and the problems that we run into are just testing grounds. Like, here's an
Oh, for sure.
obstacle. How are you going to get around it? Are you going to use the tools that you already have? Are you going to sit down and cry and throw a temper tantrum because that's what you're used to doing?
Yep. Yep.
So
Yep.
look at the obstacles that pop up as opportunities. You know, I can either get stuck behind this obstacle or I can go, ooh, new challenge. How am I going to overcome this? And you learn to have fun with it because it's going to happen. So prepare yourself for that.
So I have an example that I could throw in there.
Let's do
I
it.
just thought about it. So I had a student talking about how she wanted to go on a missions trip, and it was to, I can't even pronounce the country. It was just it had like 15
She
letters
wanted to
in it,
go.
but she really wanted to go, and um she had told me about it, and like generally my classes meet once a week, so it's a week until I see the next, group or whatever, or see her again. And over the course of that week, every single day, God's like, you should give her money. You should give her money. You should give her money. And I'm going back and forth like, I mean, this was early on in my career and I wasn't making a lot. And I was like, I don't know that I can actually manage to do that, Lord. Like, I know that you're saying that I should. And then the selfish part of me is like, yeah, but you have bills to pay and you need gas money and how are you going to buy lunch next week? All these things are popping up. And
That's the enemy.
oh, it 100%
Yeah.
was. And I recognized it. And I'm literally driving to school the next week. And I stopped at the ATM and everything within me was like, no, don't withdraw the money. So I took it out. And then when I got to class and she came in right before we started, and I was even kind of like still hesitant at this point. I handed it to her like quietly and I said, "This is for your missions trip." And she started crying.
Of course.
And she was like, "I just decided last night that I wasn't going to go. Like that,
Oh.
I really didn't think it was for me." And she goes, "Now I have to go." And I was like, "Exactly." And now you already have, like I think it was like $50. It wasn't a lot, but I'm like, now you have the first amount that you need to meet your
Yeah.
goal. And she's been there twice since. And like, had I not done that, like I didn't realize how that would impact her life that way, but obviously God did.
Yeah.
But you really have to step into it and just you have
But
to
that's
fight
you
against it.
stepping into your faith saying, all
Yeah.
right, God, I don't have the money for this, but I'm trusting that you'll provide for me.
Right.
And that's all, like when you stop looking at the world to fulfill whatever it is your needs are, and you start saying, you know what, God, I trust that you're my provider, you're my protector, you're my healer, you're all of the things that I'm desperately seeking to find here on earth. So much of that pressure, that restriction, that fear is just lifted.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of, for me, the financial freedom that came when I started tithing regularly and was like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't care how much money I make. I think I started at 3% when I first started. I was like, 3% of every amount of money I make, I don't care how much it is, how little it is, 3% is going to go. I'm going to give it back to the church or to a nonprofit or to somebody who's in need.
Yeah.
And I just started to get obedient with that 3%. And that's grown to 10% at this point. Plus, I do offerings on top of that. And my income every year has gotten better.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that I have like a ton of money. It's God starts to maneuver and make things affordable
Right.
in ways that you don't think.
Yeah.
So it's not just that money is paying my bills. God's like, I'm going to find you that house that's $100,000 less, but worth $200,000 more, because that's how I operate.
Right.
I talk to people. I'm in the process of buying a house. So that's why it's fresh on my mind. But I talk to these real estate agents that I know don't have a relationship with God, and they don't, have like the supernatural belief system that my mom has shown and raised, and we've witnessed it, so it works. But it's God, he's constantly reminding me, just you need what you need right now. Don't go for the glamorous and have to have the biggest house. But when I talk to people who sell houses and it's just like panic mode where you can afford that, you got to have this X amount of dollars. If you don't have that, you're not getting a house. And it's like, well, I'm just going to have to show you how God's going to provide that for me because it's happened in the past. And, the things that I never expected to be able to afford are the things that I'm doing
Right.
without effort at this
Yeah,
point. Like
I
it's
can
not
see.
like I'm trying to force myself to do it. But now I know I no longer panic when I'm like, oh, I could lose my job. Oh, the economy is going to crash. There's no fear there because whatever's going to happen, one is going to happen. You can't control the economy crashing or not crashing. But where is your faith? Because your faith is what's going to get you through those hard
Yeah.
times. Um, Not how much money you have in your bank account. Like it just,
Well, and you're going to get just what you need. And there's that verse too that says, even the birds of the air don't worry about what they're going to eat tomorrow.
yeah.
And
If they die, they go to heaven and nobody.
right. You get hit by a car.
That's my radical acceptance. Like, well, if I starve, at least I die and go to heaven.
I won't be hungry. Feral mode today.
Sorry.
Now it's fun.
So
Bethany says, if they tell you you should do X and it's terrible advice, are they shouldering? Couldn't get that out. That's a
bull
question.
shouldering. I don't know what that is, bull shouldering.
Is that like bullying?
So if somebody gives you terrible advice, um, what I would say is anytime anybody gives you any advice, even if you think at some point we're giving you advice on this, test it. Test it. Put it into practice, see what it does. If it brings positive outcomes and it benefits and makes your life better, then you're walking towards your goal, then keep doing it. But if you implement it and it makes life worse, or it's hard, or it's complicated, or it doesn't feel like, then leave it. Like,
Yeah, it's not for you.
everybody's journey is unique and specific to them. So, again, going back to what people tell you should and shouldn't do, that's something that that's a red flag that goes up for me when somebody's like, oh, well, you should have done this. And it's like, okay, well, if I did do that, and I just get real curious and I'll start asking a ton of questions, um, because that's what breaking things down does. When you break things down, you're getting to the root cause. It's not because you're stupid and you don't understand. Like, misunderstandings happen all the time. Ignorance is a part of life. You don't know what you don't know, which is, again, I think I posted this. I don't know if I talked about it, or I wrote it in my ebook. Never mind. So you'll read this in my ebook if you order it. If you look at all of the knowledge, if you took all the knowledge in the world and you put it into a pie graph, this circle, and you took, I will say, a 9H lead point, because I used to do architecture, and 9H is like the finest, lightest lead that you can draw with. If you take a line from the center of that circle and you draw it to the edge of the circle, that line represents the information that you know that you know. Everything that I talk about, counseling wise, it's things that I know, books that I've read, information that I know. If you drew a slightly darker, thicker line right next to that line, that would represent all of the information that you don't know. So, like for me, I know that I don't know how to play the piano. I know that I don't know how to play football. I know that I don't know how to change an engine in a car, but I know that those are things that people do know. So, it's stuff that I know that I don't know. The whole rest of that pie graph is all of the information that you don't know that you don't know. And that's the information that all of having conversations, meeting random people, talking, and just letting them share their information and asking questions. Curiosity is what brings knowledge. That's what brings change. Because if I just know everything, one, I got some grandiosity going on, which is one of the top 3 attributes of narcissism. So you don't know everything. You know what you know. You don't know what you don't know. So if I want to, talk to clients and share information of what I know, but then they bring in information from their experience, that's going to change what I would say or how I would respond to certain things. So you are the expert in your own life. You know you better than anybody else. But there are things that you probably don't know that you don't know about you that other people are aware of. And they're like, oh. So when somebody brings, something to the table, let's say it's a harsh word, I remember one of the hardest things that my little sister said to me when I was in the midst of like one of the most abusive relationships I'd ever been in. I had just almost committed suicide. I was an emotional wreck. Like I had no reason, no will, no motivation to live. Like I was just over it. And, you know, when I was talking about that, she said, I'm so sick of you playing the victim all the time. And in the moment, I was just like, nobody loves me. Not even my sister loves me. But it was in that moment that I heard God say, but do you want to continue to choose to be? Because I was like, I am the victim. Like, I'm telling you what just happened to me. But God was like working in the supernatural realm. But do you want to choose to continue to be? And it was the first time, this was years and years ago, but it was the first time I had like that aha moment where I was like, what do you mean I have a choice in being abused by somebody? Like, how do I have a choice in that? And it wasn't that people aren't going to abuse me. It was you are choosing to do things that put you in the path of this happening to you. And when you come across it and you recognize it and it's a crossroad, instead of you letting it be a crossroad and you continue on, you get distracted by it. And now you're walking down this path that I never intended for you to go down. But because it was shiny, or I say shiny because that's like pretty and stuff. And it's what people who have ADHD's brains are always like, oh, this girl, oh, that's moved over there.
Yeah.
So, and that's how the enemy approaches. Like, he approaches you in ways that are attractive to get you off the course. So stay focused and stay on your course. Allow these intersections with people or situations or experiences just be that. Don't get stuck there and don't start walking a different path because you think it might be better. Really, it's the flesh. I really like this. It feels good. I'm gonna eat the whole like me and pastries yesterday. I should not have eaten all the pastries, but I did.
Drive, but
it's a 9-hour drive. Yeah, justification. It is what it is.
Okay, so you want to know something really funny right now?
Yeah.
This is an example of where A, I should have had my reading glasses on, and B, I actually think that was a very beneficial. This was an intended tangent because it wasn't bull shouldering. She said bullshitting.
Oh, bullshitting. Okay, yeah.
But she spelled it should.
Okay.
And she goes, it was a joke. And like for the last 5 minutes, she's been texting and laughing, and I'm like, I'll bring it up. Talking about but it actually turned into a really good like conversation. Right, so maybe that's gonna be.
We'll record this. We'll write it down, and we're gonna now refer to this scenario. No, I didn't.
All right.
I have to record that.
That's okay.
I did forget to record anyways.
Well, it is recorded on there. It's okay. Fine. We're having a good time because it's in delay and we're all laughing.
We'll call that bull shouldering from now on. That's going to be a new thing. TM.
Thanks, Bethany. Jessica also Conrad. That is yours. I love it though. So she said also, God is the reason we have our house. We never could have afforded this area, and getting this house was a miracle. And the next year we were pregnant, so God provides.
Absolutely. Amen. That's a great testimony.
Next month.
All right. So God has equipped you. So the next stage he talks about is correcting your understanding. Something we can learn from the story of David is that we all have innate passions that God has deposited into our hearts. We didn't create them. They exist through divine providence. We then have to get the right interpretation of those passions because our passions can lead us to our purpose. It then takes the Holy Spirit to help us correctly frame our purpose and our passions. So this to me spoke profoundly because I'm literally like the jack of all trades. Like that's what my graduation cap said, jack of all trades and finally master of one. But it didn't go to waste. Every experience that I've had, every job that I've been in, every role that I've played, it's trained my brain. It's given me skills. But more than anything, it's given me opportunity to connect with people in every way, shape, or form possible. Like I was just like, I'm never going to find something that I'm good at. I'm just going to be a professional student for life, which might still be the case. But
not a bad thing.
I meet people who I'm just like, oh my gosh, like that's a story I've been through. I've walked that path with you. Okay, like you're going to get through this and I'm going to be here and I'm not going to judge you because I totally know what that feels like and that experience sucks. But this was what I, took away from it at the end.
Hmm.
So keep trugging through this. We're going to get through this together, and there will be something. I think I talked about this at our last podcast, but if not, I'm going to repeat it again. If you are somebody who's constantly asking why this, why that, why did you say that, why did you do that, why is this happening to me, why, your why is the at the end point.
Hmm.
So you will get to the why. That is like maybe a goal that you can be working towards, but you will not understand why until you work through it and you're on the other side looking
Hmm.
back going, oh, that's why. So just like in books, when you're like, what is the point of all of this? And you get to the end and you're like, oh, it makes sense now.
Yep.
Like that is life. So stop asking the why question. Um, I don't Let me rephrase that. I don't want you to stop asking why questions because why questions lead to internal dialogue that helps you problem solve. When you're asking why, take time to intentionally try to answer those questions and then ask another question and then answer it and then ask another question. So, Dr. Caroline Leaf talks about this in Switching on Your Brain, the book that she wrote, which we're going to actually read that book later this year. Um, but she talks about how, the best way to connect your subconscious mind and bring it into the conscious mind is by having this dialogue back and forth with yourself, this talking.
Hmm.
Albert Einstein said it, the most intelligent people in the world talk to themselves. You talk out loud, you hear yourself say something different. When you hear it with your ears, it's different than when you're just saying it in your
Yep.
head. It sounds different. When you write it down, you're connecting to the paper, you're grounding yourself in the present moment.
Hmm.
So you're paying attention to what you're writing, you're letting the emotion out. And then when you go back and reread what you wrote, you're gaining clarity because you're reading it from an outside perspective.
Hmm.
So that's what starts to connect your subconscious into your conscious mind. To me, in my experience and kind of what I've been researching, your inner child is your subconscious mind. So if you're having all of these reactions, these emotional outbursts, and you're like, I don't know where this is coming from, I don't understand it, your inner child is your emotional outbursts. So you got to go back in time when you know that you were having these types of reactions to things, and you've got to start forgiving, processing, retraining your brain to look at that situation from a perspective that an adult would have now versus what your childlike brain, because our brains aren't fully developed as kids. So we create these stories and we live in these fantasy worlds. And then because we repeat them so much, they become habitual in our thinking patterns and we become adults and we still operate out of them, even though they're not effective or helpful anymore.
And Carly says that makes sense as to why journaling helps me so much.
Yay.
And Bethany said, "It's okay, you're welcome. God was using my sass and your poor reading skills for my good." For good.
See, you can always make something good come out of chaos. I think that's probably my main goal is like, this is just how normal, you have almost a PhD. I have 2 years left of my doctorate
Yep.
degree and we
So
still have brain farts.
yeah, I think I have a PhD in brain
And
farts.
brain farts. So every path's going to look different because your personality determines your path. So, next part, this is probably the hardest part. This is winning in the waiting room. So these are all the times when you're being trained in patience. And so we talked last time about picking like that word of the year. What's your word of the year? Patience was my word of the year
Yeah.
for 2 years straight. Like
Mm-hmm.
I could
It took
not get
time.
it.
Yeah.
So it took me a long time to develop the skill of patience. Um, and it started with driving the speed limit. It
Ooh.
started little tiny
Yeah.
things,
Yeah.
like when
Sweet
somebody puts me
suggestions.
on the phone or on hold when I'm calling into the bank or something. I learned how to control my emotions while I was waiting instead of getting impatient and being like, oh my gosh, don't these people know how to do their job? Because as soon as you step into criticism and judgment, like you're outside of God's gift for you. So instead I was like, okay, how can I enjoy waiting for this person to answer the phone? And I just started doing other things. So like when I knew I was going to make phone calls that were going to take a long time and I'd be waiting, I would do the dishes, or I would do laundry, or I would, clean up in some area.
Mhm.
And so my focus was then on that. And then when somebody picked up the phone, I would stop what I was doing and answer the phone.
Yeah.
Do you know what else that teaches you? How to overcome your ADHD tendencies. You focus on one thing at a time. You break it, with people like you, how you said, like when you get in the zone and you're focused on something and somebody interrupts, you get irritated.
Oh boy, do I.
Most people do
Mhm.
because your brain is focused. You want to focus. So you have to practice.
Mhm.
This is the waiting room. You have to practice the things that bring that out of you and then control it.
Mhm.
So instead of getting irritated, I'm going to use that as an opportunity to become curious. And that's what the pastor, I think, talked about today at church,
Mhm.
which is just like validating for what we're reading. But
Well,
yeah, you always have an opportunity. Your perspective is your choice. You have a choice to be offended by things. You have a choice in how you respond to things. You have a choice in how you react. You always have a choice. And if you have reactions because you have past trauma or PTSD and you have these triggers that come up, it is your responsibility and your choice to develop skills
Mhm.
in order to reduce that. So it's no longer a trigger. Your triggers are your responsibility. So me being somebody who had PTSD and complex PTSD and all of that kind of stuff and abusive relationships, that was really hard for me to hear because it's like, well, okay, why don't you just stop doing those things? And I wouldn't react this way.
Yeah.
Guys, like, because people don't walk around on eggshells. Like,
Mhm.
you don't like walking on eggshells. What makes you think everybody else does?
Mhm.
So eat your own words,
Mhm.
swallow
Mhm.
your pride.
Mhm.
If you don't want to walk on eggshells with other people, then you need to train and equip yourself to stop walking on eggshells yourself,
Yep. Definitely. Well, and I think so the
or stop
ADHD,
expecting other people to.
yeah. True. Yeah, and also, yeah, growing up in an environment where again, that was like you don't challenge people if you want to stay safe. And so that becomes internalized and then
Mm-hmm.
everybody you meet from then on, you're like, like I have to predict their mood or predict how they're going to react or whatever. That's walking on eggshells and that's being afraid. But I heard it once and this stuck with me. And this is in those situations where I'm scared, but I do it anyway, is where when you're fearing man, you're putting them above God. And I
Ooh, yeah.
that has always been something that actually a really good friend of mine sent me that a long time ago. But fear of man is um idolizing basically and not putting God first. And whenever that it comes down to that, I'm from that point forward, I've always, even when I'm like shaking, crying, whatever it is, I'm just like, nope, I'm going to choose God over this situation. And like, and I mean, it's okay to not have perfect emotions walking through it. You just have to walk through it.
Yeah, and you have to release your emotions and identify them as you go through. Hence my emotions board on the wall. But I wanted to say something in accordance and reflection of that. You
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I don't even remember. It'll come back to me. So winning in the waiting room. Every person pursuing purpose has to endure the waiting room. Every gift has to be able to withstand a dry season, a season of waiting and feeling forgotten. The waiting room can be tough because it can make you second guess yourself and overanalyze what you may have done wrong to get stuck there. But the fact is, doing everything right is what may have brought you into the waiting room anyway. So we see this principle at work in the life of Jesus. He was about 30 years old when he began his ministry. He didn't start right out of high school or college. He had to wait. The Son of God had to endure the waiting room just like we do. He had to wait until God's divine timing released him. So that, and then he goes into the story of Joseph. This was me. I mean, I was 28 years old when I started college, and by 40, I almost have a doctorate degree.
Yeah.
So, do I want to be like, oh, I should have done this in my early 20s and I should have done like, if I would have done what I did at 28, at 21, I wouldn't have had the 7 years of life experience and darkness that I walked down.
Yeah.
But doing what I do, I don't work with people who have like perfect lives. Like I work with people who have walked in a lot of dark places. And because I dealt with all of that within myself, going into that dark place with somebody else isn't scary for me. I'm going to be the person who's holding your hand and going, no, okay, no, try it.
Yeah.
It's okay. Say that thing that you want to say. It's okay. If it doesn't come out right, that's fine. It's not going to come out right. You're not going to do it perfectly the first time, but you're going to learn something from it. So what can you do different the next time? And then the next time you do it, you're going to maybe mess up again, but you're going to learn something from it. So what are you going to do after that? It's a constant growth and development. Everything we face. Hi, Thea.
Yeah, Bethany just said the dog is so cute.
She's
I'm
like
gonna
a
die.
sweet baby. She's like, Mom, you're getting too excited. I need to come over and calm you down.
She says, our God is always bigger than fear, and your 20s are for being dumb and learning learning what you don't know.
That's a true story.
Come on. Join the party. She's like, I'm just gonna I'm just gonna squeeze right in there.
Just
oh,
squeeze right in.
just
Yeah.
right in.
Ooh, there we go. All right. So what does your waiting room look like? You might be in the waiting room. You might have gone through a waiting period. You might have a waiting room in your future. So that's something that I would just really take time to ponder on and maybe journal about.
Oh, Phil's watching. Hi,
All right. Build my house, not your kingdom. That's what God said to him in his waiting room. So we're not going to read through his. So this develops faith and patience. When you're waiting on God, you will have some seasons when you know why you are waiting and some seasons when you don't. So sometimes you don't even know why you're waiting. You're just, I feel like I've been in that season for a long time. Like, when can I get my own, where do I go? What do I do? Like, and now I'm just like, oh, like having to take 2 years off from, my doctorate degree because of an unexpected financial whims that happened. And they said I couldn't take classes until I paid off 3 years of a doctorate degree. Like, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
But God provided a way and he made it happen. And I am still under my 7-year cap. And, the other thing that happened during that time that was unexpected is my dad was diagnosed with cancer. And so I moved home and I helped take care of him. And had I been, working full time, running my own business, plus going to school during that time, and I needed to take my dad to his appointments and help my mom out, like that had been way too much on my plate. I didn't know that that was going to happen. God foresaw, he already knew. And so something came up in my life that seemed like a roadblock, but actually was a place of waiting that I needed to be. And now that I've transitioned through that, I just got a phone call 2 days ago and they're like, if you can pay off your tuition, we'll give you 25% off and we can get you started in the fall again. And I'm like, all right, great. So am I going to have a house before the fall, God? Is that what you're telling me? I'm going to buy a house, start school. Like, what comes next? Where do I go? I don't know. I don't know all the answers to that. But I'm not beating myself up and being anxious about it because that's not going to change the outcome of whatever happens. It's just going to make the waiting period worse than it already is. So sometimes it is about learning how to just be content and still and quiet and at peace, even though you're not getting your way.
Yeah.
So,
and that can be hard. That in and of itself is a big lesson to learn. Carly also says, oh, so I only have 2 more years of being dumb. And Bethany says, I have 2 more months.
2 more years, 2 more months. I don't know. I turned 40 this past year and I still feel like I don't know nearly anything. But it's so nice to look back on my 20s and be like, well, at least you know way more than you did there. Yeah. I might not be where I want to be, but I'm definitely not where I used to be. So and thank God I still don't have too many wrinkles. I might be able to figure this out.
She's got a great skincare routine. But that also makes me think, 10 years from now when you're 50 and you look back and you be like,
okay. It won't matter. People will be calling me doctor. So
exactly.
I'll feel good about
it'll be
that
just what
part
the
of my life
ordered.
at least. It's just what the doctor ordered. No, I kid. I don't even know if I want people to call me doctor. It's just something that is going to help with doing what we're doing.
Right.
So,
right.
Go ahead.
Something to add to that. I highlighted the single line that says, we all have to wait. So to also think about the billions of people that are on the planet and how if you've ever been in a situation where you're like, I'm going crazy because I would really like to know how this is going to work out, but I know I just need to trust.
Mm-hmm.
There's always somebody that you can, there's generally always somebody that you can relate with about that. And that's someone who will pray with you, or someone who can at least relate and say, again, like, here's how I handled that. And this will help you, maybe it won't. But um, just remember that you're not isolated, because I think that is an enemy tactic too, to think that you have to make a decision right now, and the fact that you don't know is bad.
Oh
And
yeah, and I'll tell you, my mom raised us, which was very contradictory for me when I was selling in the sales when I was a salesperson, because she said, if anybody ever pressures you to do something right now, then it's not of the Lord. And I
that's
was like,
good.
yeah, it,
Mhm.
it was real good. And it was great for a long time. Relationship wise, struggled.
Mhm.
But when I was selling timeshare for the few years that I did that, real difficult because the whole thing is you have to buy now. And
Yeah.
I was like, I don't even believe this. How am I supposed to sell it? Like this will be here for you next year, you know?
Yeah.
Um, but it really drove that back home for me where I was like, you know what? No, if I do feel pressured to do something right now. So I take this into dating. You know, if I meet somebody who's like, you know, well, like if we don't do this, then, you know, I'll just there there could be somebody else. And it's like, all right, cool. Then you go find that other person
Mhm.
because my principles and my values and my standards are here, and I'm not going to lower them so you feel good in this moment.
Right.
And that's really, really hard to do in your younger years, like,
Mhm.
because you're still going through that you know, that need to belong. You're going through the psychosocial stage of identity and role confusion. You're trying to figure out how to, you know, transition into this love, this place of love and loving others. And so the enemy is really good at manipulating and telling you a little bit of the truth, but twisting it in such a way that's going to prevent you from actually finding out the full truth.
Mhm.
And I think that's, you know,
Mhm.
you said your word this year is discernment.
Mhm.
And that is what discernment is, being able to tell when somebody's lying to you
Mhm.
and discerning that this would be a better option for me. Even
Right.
though that option sounds great, and sometimes they do sound great, but it's like, I think this would also, this is what I need to do though, because that's not going to lead me in the direction that God's having me go.
Yeah.
And this is why or how I know that type of thing.
Yeah. If there's
But
deception involved, then it's not of God. Like, that's the
mhm.
thing. Like, you can feel it, and that's,
But
you get.
deception's involved in everything. Like, I don't care where you go. Like, somebody's deceiving you. Something, a sign that's on the wall that you're reading as you walk by. Like, deception
Ads
is
on TV.
literally everywhere. So when you have discernment, when you're reading or you meet somebody or you hear something, it's no longer this, well, I wonder if they're telling me the truth or not. Like, you're knowing the Holy Spirit
Hmm.
is who tells you that's not,
It's a
no.
conviction.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So,
So I also highlighted, every person pursuing a purpose has to endure the waiting room. Many of us can relate. I'm skipping passages, but this is
mhm.
page 92. Many of us can relate to the feeling of being forgotten. The job referral, the new contract, the business opportunity, the speaking invitation, or the music gig, the special favor to help you get into promotion. That is something I waited a very long time for at my job. I
Yeah.
waited longer than I think anybody in my department has ever had to wait. But um, I also heard God say, when it's time, I'll make it happen. It's just, we had to get to a point where, um, and that was kind of how the Belize program was born.
Yeah.
So, um, but it took a lot of patience and a lot of course, I was frustrated, but it did happen. And then it was just like, it was bigger than I could have ever.
But what do you think what did God equip you with and prepare you for? Looking back, what
Mhm.
didn't you have at the time that you wanted it, that through the waiting period you developed or achieved?
Mhm.
I want to say achieved, but that's not the word I'm thinking of. Um, that helped this be successful.
That's a good question. I think in that time period, I was learning how to communicate more effectively with people who adversity is I work in an area where we can be a lot of people can be competitive.
Mm-hmm.
They can be maybe not always friendly, but it's hard sometimes to relate to people, and then there's just a lot of um, polarized views on things. And if you don't necessarily agree with what's going on, then you might be the odd guy out, if that makes sense. So I had to learn how to talk to people, and I had to learn how to not let that control who I was. Um, and I think once I reined that in, it it got way better because now all of a sudden I'm able to, work with people and um, be more collaborative. And then there's opportunities coming my way because I'm being patient and I'm listening to people versus, approaching the situation with a preconceived notion of what's going to happen, I think.
I think a part of what I'm hearing, and maybe this is a prophetic word for you, but what I'm hearing you say is, or maybe this is God letting you know, I need you to hear my voice louder than you hear everybody else's voices.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're in a competitive field, you're listening to everybody.
Yeah.
And like you said, I had to learn to listen, but it's what are you listening for?
And what are you believing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that was definitely a big part of it too, because, and that kind of goes back to what people say about like with, even with David's brothers and going into battle, but people saying, no, you are qualified for these reasons or you're not.
Mm-hmm.
And him saying, well, that's not true. Like they just haven't seen that part of you yet, and I'm still developing it. Like
Yeah.
I'm gonna bring it out, but it's not time yet.
And from just knowing you for the time that I have, a big part of your fear was what people thought of you or what they said of you.
Mm-hmm.
And what we perceive people. So this is oftentimes what we perceive others think of us is what we think of ourselves. And then we project that. And then we say, well, they think that about me, or they're going to think I'm stupid if I say this. When really you've already convinced yourself that you're probably going to sound stupid if you say that.
Mm-hmm.
When in reality, if you said it, there's probably 7 other people that were like, thank God somebody else asked that question because I really wanted to know the answer, but I felt stupid asking it. So that was one of the things that I really mastered was anytime I have a question, I'm asking. I don't care how anybody feels or thinks about it. I don't care if you think I'm stupid for asking it. I'm going to ask it over and over and over again until it makes sense to me because I'm the one who's learning this.
Mm-hmm.
So how you feel about my ability to learn is irrelevant to me.
Right.
Because I want to learn it. And so if I don't understand it the first time, I'm going to ask a clarifying question. If I don't understand it that time, I'm going to ask another question. And I had a supervisor who I did this with because she was explaining something that me and 3 other people didn't understand, but nobody else was willing to speak up about it. So I did, which made her not like me very much. And all I kept saying was, we're just not understanding what you're asking us to do. And
Mm-hmm.
she looked at me and said, well, if you have to ask me that, then maybe you're in the wrong profession. So here I am, a brand new clinician working in a mental health facility under supervision still,
Mm-hmm.
admitting that I'm incompetent in an area that I'm trying to learn in. And then I had a supervisor, the leader that I'm supposed to look up to, basically call me incompetent to my face. So did I, tuck my tail between my leg and go, oh, I'm such, I'm never going to be good at this. Like if my boss doesn't think I'm good at this, and she's been doing this for years. Well, I had discernment at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew, like, I don't know what her problem is, but I'm not stupid. And I do understand what you're saying, but the pieces are not making sense. So I'm trying to figure out how to put the pieces together. And I've collaborated with 3 other people who don't know. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm putting myself in a vulnerable position and being the person who's asking and speaking up about this. And then you want to flip it around and make it something else because you can't actually answer the question.
Mm-hmm.
So ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
Get really good at asking questions
Mm-hmm.
because even if you don't get the answer, you'll have an understanding of who the people are that you're surrounding yourself with.
Right.
When people ask me questions, I don't talk to them like they're stupid.
Mm-hmm.
I explain and explain, and I'll explain it from a different angle. Well, maybe it'll make sense if I say it this way, or let me explain it maybe this way, or let me try to bring this into it. That's strategizing, but you have to
Mhm.
exercise your brain and train your brain to do that. So, how are you doing that? Reading these books, putting into practice the things that it tells you to put into practice.
Mhm.
Faith without works is dead.
Mhm.
You can ask any teacher, yourself included,
Mhm.
um, any neuroscientist, and they'll tell you it doesn't matter how much information is coming in. What becomes habitual is what you put into practice. You do it and you do it and you do it and you do it. It
Mhm.
doesn't matter how you feel about it. Your brain will change what's going on and eventually you'll feel good about it.
Yep.
But until you go through that refining process, which we need to get to that because that's my favorite part of this whole 3 chapters that we read. But to close on chapter 1, if you want to continue to rise, then you have to forget about the plateau. Forget about the feeling that you will only get so far in life, that you've hit the ceiling. Keep serving God and hold on to your declaration of faith. Remain committed to God's timeline, and you will find your way to the top. The more faithful you are, the better you position yourself to allow greatness to emerge. And so when this says you'll find your way to the top might not be what you think it is. So just keep that in mind too. Um, so exercise for that, just doing one thing differently, modifying your daily routine. Um, this could be, there's the wellness wheel, 7 areas of wellness. Mental wellness, emotional, physical, spiritual, environmental, financial, and social. So those are the 7 areas of wellness. And they say that, experts say that we need to be balanced in all of these areas. But really, balance is included in balance is knowing or having self-awareness. So there
Mhm.
might be a season of my life where I don't need to be going to the gym 3, 4 days a week. What I
Mhm.
do need to be doing is reading 5 books in 8 weeks because, that's a requirement for. So to put that to bring a doctorate degree level, and I'm just using this for my own personal example life. When I decided to pursue my doctorate degree, I had to think about the things I was willing to sacrifice in order to make that a part of my future.
Mhm.
Going out and spending time with a lot of friends, kind of, my social life hit the back burner a little
Mhm.
bit. Vacations and stuff were a lot less. I wasn't coming home to visit my family as much. I couldn't do social things as often as I wanted to. I stopped watching TV. I literally cut the TV off. Probably one of the best decisions I ever made in my life
Mhm.
was I stopped watching TV. The only time I watched TV is if I was out in public or at a friend's house, which was planned time that I could set aside to do those things.
Mhm.
So, I had to think about other areas of sacrifice that I was going to have to make. How many hours am I going to work while I'm also doing this? What
Mhm.
are other extracurricular activities that I like to do that I'm not going to really have time for because this is going to require an extra 20 hours a week on top of the 40 hours a week I'm already working? So you have to make adjustments. And the coolest thing that I'm learning about the brain through this research is that your brain, if you're not using a part of your brain, let's say you lose your vision and your visual cortex is no longer being used for vision. Other parts of your brain will move into that area and give you vision in other ways. You'll learn to see through sound, through touch, through
Smell.
smell, vibrations. Like your
Mhm.
your other senses kick in and literally take over that part of your brain in order to keep adapting and being functional in society.
Mhm.
So that's the plasticity part of it. Um, so regardless of what you choose to change in your life, if you do it enough for long enough, your brain will make the adaptation. It will adapt to that.
Mhm.
So, me thinking, I can't, I'll never, what am I going to do without my friends and hanging out? Because I was so extroverted. Well, what this actually did was bring my introversion into balance.
Mhm.
So now I'm at like a 50-50. I can do the extroverted stuff, but I'm not drained when I'm alone and I don't have to have that. So it's learning, my brain adapted. it taught me how to be comfortable in this new environment because I didn't fight it. I wasn't resistant to it. I wasn't cutting myself down and being judgmental.
Mhm.
I just was like, okay, cool. So I'm going to learn how to read. And now I really like spending time alone. And I'm going to take a vacation by myself because
Mhm.
I still have to study, but I want to go on vacation. So you learn how to be adaptable. And then you meet people and you try new things and you have these new experiences. And 10 years down the road, you're going to meet somebody and you're going to go, oh my gosh, that waiting period I was in, I can share this with you because it's going to be helpful. Like,
Mhm.
that's the whole purpose of
Mhm.
this. Like, it teaches us how to, I think, connect, maybe build community and
Yeah.
make friendships and really find that place of belonging, if that
Mhm.
makes sense. I
It
don't know.
does. It does.
But pick one thing, change it one little piece at a time, implement it into practice to where you don't have to think about it anymore. Your body and your brain automatically do it.
Mhm.
That's the whole purpose. So chapter 6 goes into potential, your doorway to greatness. I loved this chapter. I don't know
Mhm.
why. Did anybody else love this chapter? Man, oh man. I was highlighting in multiple colors, actually wrote stuff down.
I
Scripture
think I got
verses
a
kept
very
popping into my mind. I was like, oh my gosh, it's here. It's all
I
coming together.
I got a very excited text message from her, and it was at like 4:30 in the morning. She was like, "Girl, blah blah blah." And I was like, "Okay,
I
cool."
love this chapter. You got to read it. It's so good.
Yeah. So I highlighted maybe not as much, but
What page are you on? So
103.
all right, so we're in part 1, discovering your potential. So before we get in there,
Okay.
how you see yourself will dictate how far you can go in life. Here is the principle that I want you to never forget. Your thinking will always seek to take you to the place where it can express itself the most. So, this is your curiosity. What is the word I'm thinking of? This is the part of your brain, the imagination. Like, your inner child wants to come out and get creative and be imaginative.
Hmm.
Fun fact, anytime you feel bored, boredom is an indicator that your brain wants creativity.
Oh,
So when you're like, oh, I'm so bored, it wants you to just do something new, try something, get creative, whatever. So,
that's why
TM,
I doodle on my notes when I'm in class. No, I'm just kidding.
that might help you
It actually
focus.
does,
That's
yeah.
probably what's helping you focus. So some call it a mindset, others refer to it as a belief system. However you choose to refer to it, it's extremely important. It will either empower or suppress your success.
Mhm.
You may have great potential, but that potential will always be limited by your mentality. So this is mind over matter. Your DNA, literally your DNA changes based upon what you tell yourself. So the inputting information, what you're watching, what you're listening to, what you're agreeing with, what you're becoming afraid of, that's all going to determine the potential of you reaching your goals. So do you absorb it all and all of a sudden it's all truth, or do you challenge it? Do you seek for opportunities to see if it is true or it's not true? Does this
Mhm.
serve me? I don't know if I want to believe this anymore, that kind of a thing. But your potential is 100% limited by your mindset. Um, so like, as you know, when I work with clients, your behaviors, I don't, there's behavioral stuff works, I think, very well with children. With adults, not so much. And I only say that because we already know a lot more than what the child's brain is. So like
Mhm.
when you're doing behavioral work with children, they're not thinking outside the box.
Mhm.
Like their brain isn't developed
They're
that
very
to that
literal.
potential. They're
Mhm.
very concrete, literal
Mhm.
thinkers.
Mhm.
So if you tell them there's only two options, they're like, "Oh, those are my only two options." So they're not too
Right.
argumentative about that.
Right.
However, we as adults know that there are so many things that I can do.
Mhm.
So as an adult, when we're trying to change our mentality, this is so much work. It takes so much energy to constantly stop a tangent thought or an intrusive thought and say, no,
Mhm.
this is what I'm going to focus on. I'm not going down that rabbit hole. I choose to forgive that person. I choose to let that go. I
Mhm.
release it from my body. I'm not holding on to it. And now you make room for actual change.
Mhm. Mhm.
So it your potential is limited by your mentality. That's all I want to say again. So discovering your potential, go ahead.
Oh, well, that made me think of something too before I get into it. With the more things that you spend time doing, And I think in particular, we were talking about this week because I realized I haven't watched what's recorded on our DVR in a long time. Do you remember me going through this list? And I lost interest at some point, but I think I was making I changed my one thing that I changed because of this book was getting up earlier in the morning and spending more time reading, praying, journaling, that sort of thing. And making sure that I have my chapter done because then, the speed picks up. We're back. Our semester started last week and it's just the day just gets really, really hectic. And I know that I need that to be in my mind and in my heart before I leave. So, anyways, I realized I hadn't watched TV in a very long time. And I was kind of like, I wonder why that is. And then I go through my DVR and it's like Forensic Files, The First 48,
Oh yeah.
Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventures. I'm like, it's all this dark stuff. And The X-Files, which I mean, I was really big into, a lot of
Sci-fi.
yes, like murder
And crime.
mystery,
Yeah.
crime, and ghosty ghosts. And
Yeah.
like my cousin's watching and we laugh at the one ghost show, but because it is ridiculous. But everything else, like I was carrying that with me. I was even listening to it in the car on the way home at night. Like, not good. Don't do that and then go to sleep. But I just went through and deleted all of that this week because I mean, I'm not watching it and it's taking up 100% of the space on the DVR, but also it's not really good for me. And I would rather be thinking on things that bring me hope or make me feel good, lift my mood, make me feel like I'm not um walking into I don't have like this cloud hanging over me. So
Yeah.
and that was a really nice revelation, but
I like
um
that.
so potential energy describes what could be but has yet to be expressed. This is page 103.
So first, for people who don't know what potential energy is, this is in science, it's an energy on an object. It's the energy an object has because of its position rather than its motion. So
Yep.
potential energy is, what could be, right?
What could
Like you're
happen?
saying.
Yeah, like you have a ball laying on the floor, you push it, it could roll very far, or you
Hmm.
throw it, it
It
could
has the
bounce.
potential to roll,
Right.
right?
Yep.
But the ball of itself is energy,
Yep.
but it has potential energy for
So we're
change
going back to
movement.
physics.
Yeah, okay. I'm not.
No, I just remember that from like fifth grade. But no, potential energy describes what could be, but has yet to be expressed. And the potential inside of you, placed there by God, represents what could, but has yet to be expressed.
So pause.
Okay.
He didn't mention this, which I was surprised by, but when I read that part, Romans 4:17 came to mind. So if there are any of you are struggling with this potential energy, like seeing your potential, I want you to meditate on Romans 4:17. Or just read through the whole book of Rome or chapter 4 of Romans. But this is where it talks about how God says to call things into existence as though it's already happening, and that's through faith. So that's kind of like the concept here. You know, you believe what you believe. This is the manifestation, right? Like if I keep believing and saying and doing something, eventually it's going to manifest. That's not always true. I mean, obviously, but for the most part, it will exist because however you predict it or create it in your imagination, whether it's real or not, that's what you're going to see.
Mm-hmm.
That's what your experience is going to be, if that makes
and
sense.
and a lot of times, I mean, and you've talked to me about this too with the mental to physical connection.
Mm-hmm.
Like what you think, if you think that
You're going to be sick
you're
all
going
the
to be
time.
sick all the time, you're going to be sick all
Your
the time.
body literally changes your cellular structure to make you sick, so it has something to fight because your mind keeps telling you you're sick. So keep that in mind.
So,
Like
and
what you say, I'm anxious, I'm depressed, I'm this, I'm that. Like you're declaring that, and then your body's like, oh, I got to produce that because the body follows what the mind says.
Yep.
So if you don't want to have your body continuously producing these things that are not helpful, then stop saying those things.
Mm-hmm.
Change the way you say it. I feel anxious is different than saying I am anxious.
Right.
I am anxious is a statement about me, my identity. I feel anxious about whatever is external. So I'm not internalizing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's less we're talking about like permanence versus temporary.
Mm-hmm.
And if I feel this way, but I know it will pass, or I'm going to do this thing to make it better, then that takes you a long way. So potential is everything you could be in life in seed form. So, and
Yes.
that's, you know, it comes back to your thought process too. So, what do you think your potential is? Some people are like, I don't have any potential. Well, then you probably won't ever
Then
because
come find me because I will plant your seed of potential.
yes, you
I
will.
will see it. I will tell you what it is, and I will
Absolutely.
hope that you grow it, but
She will declare it.
I will just plant the seed.
Yep.
So these are your hidden abilities, your concealed greatness. So what are you secretly good at? I think one of the things he had talked about in the other chapter was, or maybe it's in here somewhere, but um thinking back into your childhood, like what were things that just naturally came to you? You didn't
Mm-hmm.
put effort into it. You
Mm-hmm.
didn't have to like try to force it. Like people were just like, "Oh, so for me personally, it was never having like a clique of friends. I don't know. We moved around so much. I never really fit in anywhere. But one of the things that I recognized is that even when things were going bad in people's lives, I was the person they were hanging out with. I was the person
Mm-hmm.
they would call. So I'm learning, God showed me years later the why on the other side looking back. Like, why did I never have a lot of really good friends? But I had moments, best friend moments, I guess you could say. Like, it wasn't ever like this long season. I mean, I have best friends now, but we go through these seasons. But what I saw was like, oh my gosh, like I have been that empathetic, like listening ear. My mom used to tell me all the time, you bring some of the weirdest people home.
It
And I'm
makes you
like, that's
feel good.
because I am weird, mom. Like I connect with these people. I don't care what they look like on the outside. Like our hearts are connected. Like I
Mm-hmm.
see their brokenness. I
Mm-hmm.
connect to that. And hence here I am doing this what I do. So accessing your potential. Um, this is where he used toothpaste, I think, is the example.
Carly has a comment before you get
Okay,
into that.
Carly,
She says, going back to potential, how do you help filter the thoughts of seeing people for their potential and not who they are showing you?
I would ask first the context of which that person is. Because if God hasn't put you in a position of speaking authority into their lives or, like to tell them something, then you don't need to. That's where
Mm-hmm.
you need to just kind of set the boundary for yourself
Mm-hmm.
where it's, you know what, I'm going to pray about this. And until you get revelation, a lot of times you don't need to go down those rabbit holes. You don't need to be the person
Mm-hmm.
who's, trying to see the potential in somebody. Now, if this is a child or a coworker or an employee, somebody that you're in that authoritative position over, so like you with your students,
Mm-hmm.
you have that position to speak that into them. So
Mm-hmm.
if somebody's coming to me, if a client's coming to me and they're like, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this, I don't tell them, yes, you can. I say, well, anytime you tell yourself you can't do something, you're not going to do it. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe just change that word. Maybe
I
look
can
at it
do
from a
this.
different way.
Yeah.
I do not try to fix people.
Mm-hmm.
My job is to not make your life perfect. My role is to help you become the best version of yourself and strategizing every
Mm-hmm.
time adversity comes your way.
Mm-hmm.
you When I see the potential in some, and I'm guilty of this, like I date potential. That's like my biggest red flag, my problem. So we see the potential in people. You have to be really good at speaking life into people when you see their potential. You speak to that potential, you don't talk to the person that they are. You know what? You are so good at, if somebody who is like is very controlling. I'm a controlling person, so like I'll just relate it back to my own life. I'm not a controlling person. I don't like to be out of control. So I don't like to control other people and what they're doing, but I like to be in control.
Mm-hmm.
So I ask a lot of questions. I'm very strategic in maneuvering and making decisions, and I take a lot of things and I take my time making decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so for people who want to deal with me. So telling me, oh, you're so controlling, like, I'm just like, okay, what's your point? Like, but the potential behind what I can do is, hey, if maybe you tried asking this question, or maybe look at it from this perspective, that might help you in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the potential in somebody isn't necessarily something that you need them to know. Like, you'd be really good if you'd stop doing this. You know, you'd be really pretty if you'd stop. I used to say that to the girls at the residential. You know, your face is so pretty when you don't have those wrinkles right here on your forehead. Like, you're really mad at me. And they would laugh. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's like, so a lot of times it's praying about it first. God, like, how can I intercede in this person's life? Like, I see their potential. How do I speak life to their potential? Does that answer your question? Does that make sense?
Yeah, let us know, Carly. And something that makes that I also have to remind myself is that um and there is a phrase or like a quote that says like don't light yourself on fire to make others warm.
Yep.
And I have always thought of that too, because there is a limit to how far you should go. And but also you have to remember to protect your own heart. So
Guard your heart. I
for
always
every
tell everybody, follow your heart, but take your brain with you.
yeah.
And now I see that posted on posters. So I didn't make it up, I'm sure, but I never read it anywhere.
You should like Google it.
I just,
It's like
well, no, I
by
just,
Jess Conrad.
people used to always say, you know, follow your heart, follow your heart. And I'm like, I've been following my heart my whole life. Like, when is my brain going to get involved? And I was like, just take your brain with you. And then I started to see this everywhere. Like, these are those epiphanies when you're just like, oh, like when you buy a new car and you're like, I've never seen this car. And then you buy it and you're like, this, everybody owns this car.
Yep.
You know, what you're not aware of, you don't really pay attention to. Once you become aware of it, your brain pays attention to
you
it.
see it
That's just
everywhere.
what we do. That's
She
how
said
we operate.
in all capital letters, yes.
Okay.
That we answered your question. But yeah, and that's the thing too. Like it's normal to want to care and to love, but just understand you know, how far you're willing to go and hold yourself to that. You know, it's not being uncaring by letting them deal with some of that, you know, in their own way, because they have to figure it out. You can't figure it all out for them. But
I had one client that I worked with who was very spiritual, and she said to me, one of the things that really helped me stop looking at people who are like evil, you know, narcissistic, vindictive, people that are just, you know, who they are. She said, one of the things I had to learn to do was look at the child light that God planted inside of them when I communicate with them, instead of looking at the person. Because we all have a light. Some of us have brighter lights than others. Some of us have dimmer lights than others. But we all have a light. And if you can look at the light inside of people and speak to that light, your reactions to people is what changes. Your perception of people, your judgment of that person or of people changes. You still have to have boundaries. So boundaries is something that we'll read a few months. We'll learn more about boundaries. But boundaries are not to control people. Boundaries tell you where you're safe.
Yeah.
So if I step over this line, I know I'm walking into territory that's going to bring a version of me that I don't like. So I don't choose to engage in that. You can talk to me every whine. You can scream at me. You can do all of that. But when you do that, I'm going to choose to walk away, because I don't like to be spoken to in that way, because I don't want to match that energy and speak to somebody else like that. Yeah. So that's a boundary. Boundaries protect you. They protect the relationship. They do not control. They do not tell people what they can and cannot do. You have to choose to say, if this person wants to continue screaming at me, then I need to figure out what I have to do about that. Like, what's my next move? Because obviously, you know, and sometimes you'll set boundaries and you'll communicate them and you'll be really, you know, respectful and polite about it. And somebody just doesn't care. You know, teenagers, they don't give a crap. They're just going to get away with whatever they want to get away with. So you have to change your strategy. You have to learn what motivates them, get to know them, ask more questions, you know, go meet somebody else. Like, if you have a really difficult coworker that you can't get along with, ask them to coffee. It might not change the dynamic of like their intent towards you as a person, but it will change how your interactions are. I promise you that. Yeah. It just does. Like, you show people kindness, and when they've been mean to you and all of a sudden they're like, oh, or God will remove them from your life. That's fine too. But
Yeah, and I'll share that I did that, and then I texted Jess and I was like,
it worked. She said, it worked. It worked. I was so scared, but it worked. And I was like, good for you, girl. Anyways. So, how do we manifest our potential for greatness? So, this might also answer your question, Carly. The potential God has placed inside of us usually has to be squeezed out.
mm-hmm.
In fact, potential works a lot like toothpaste. If I open the tube and turn it upside down, nothing happens. Turning the toothpaste upside down doesn't get the toothpaste onto my toothbrush because it is a paste. I have to squeeze the tube to get the contents out. Your potential works the same way. It responds to the demand being placed upon it. Some form of pressure needs to be applied. We talked about this earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Potential has to be pushed out for you to reap the benefits. So, my unsolicited advice, because this is my personality, my temperament, the person that I am, I make people uncomfortable. It's just what I do.
It's a skill.
It's not something that like I intentionally purposely go after. But I've heard a lot of people tell me when we get it, when I start moving into a depth of our relationship that's beyond just like superficial acquaintanceship, I ask deep interpersonal, like just life, like deep life related questions. Yeah. And when I hear certain answers, I'll challenge that, you know, and then I get resistance and pushback. And I'm like, okay, well, you know, this is just another way to look at it. My mom used to tell me all the time, she's like, it's just like you love conflict. And I'm like, I don't love conflict. I feel super uncomfortable and like I don't love conflict, but I'm not afraid of it.
Right.
And when it's in the room and there's a big elephant in the room that everybody's pretending isn't there, I'm not afraid to be like, yo, what's this elephant doing here? You know, and that's a metaphorical, obviously, you know, example. But if I walk into, you know, the room and somebody who I normally would get like a, hey, what's up, you know, response from is slamming drawers, like I'm not gonna seclude myself and hide, and I'm not gonna be like, hey, stop slamming doors, what's wrong with you, you know, I don't like this. I'm gonna look at them and say, hey, you're not acting the way you normally do, like your demeanor's off, like what's going on, is there something you want to talk about, like do we need to take a deep breath, you need a hug, do you want me to high five it, do I need to smack you, like what do you need? People know what they need if you give them space and enough time to think and process through that. Don't tell them what they need. Stop telling them what to do, what they should and shouldn't. Here we go. This should and shouldn't do. Oh, you shouldn't feel like that. Like, you're so pretty. Who cares if he broke up with you? That is not helpful.
Right.
Like, it's not helpful,
no,
right?
It isn't. No.
So it's instead going, you know what, girl, I think you're beautiful. What do you need right now? Now, do we need to go to the spa? Do we need to go get a manicure? Like, do we need to do, like, what do you want to do? What is your need? And sometimes their need is to cry on your shoulder. Sometimes their need is to vent everything out of their system and they don't need advice. Sometimes their need is for you to tell them that they're crazy for thinking the way that they're thinking and to remind them of, you know, you have to take the context of the relationship into consideration too. You know, I talk to my best friends of 15 years very differently than I talk to people I've met 1 or 2 years ago. You know, I have a lot of rapport and history and they know me through the ups and the downs. New people don't really know me through the ups and the downs. So I have to be very aware of how I present myself in any situation with any relationship. And if somebody's coming to me for advice that's not a client and it's therapeutic, like I preface with, I'm probably going to tell you things you don't want to hear. Like, are you okay with that? Because I'm not going to lie to you.
Right.
And then you have to let them respond. And if they get mad at you, I've had people do that. They'll cuss me out. They'll tell me everything under the sun. And 6 months later, they call me and they're like, you were right. Sorry for cussing you out because everything you said, that was exactly what I needed to hear. And I'm in a place now where I'm willing to do it. So thanks for being the first person to plant that seed. It just is. You can't personalize people's experiences. Everybody's going through something at different times, unexpectedly, expectedly. You just never know. So build your skill set. To me, if curiosity is like one of the most beneficial tools you can have in your communication, you know, tools. So we're talking about
Yeah.
accessing your potential. You highlighted a lot more than me on that part, but I got into this paragraph here. So if you want to read before then,
Okay.
like why that stuck out to you.
So as you let God direct your steps on your journey, he will often lead you to things for which you feel inadequately prepared. I struggle with that a lot just because, and I forget easily. I mean, my career started as a preschool teacher and now I'm working at a university. So like God propelled me forward and I've been there for a long time, but I still struggle with imposter syndrome
Oh
sometimes,
yeah, I
a
wrote that
lot.
down, imposter syndrome. This is
Yeah.
what imposter syndrome
This
is.
is what imposter literally on the same.
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
that's cool.
absolutely.
So there have been so many moments where walking through, and I love my career, I love working with my students, but I'm also working with a lot of, you know, highly qualified, very well educated people who have maybe three more degrees than I do, or they've studied something in depth, or they serve on every single committee, and I again try really hard not to compare myself, but sometimes in those situations when you have people like sitting around a table and everyone's speaking
Highly of themselves with their
mhm.
grandiosity. Who cares about those people?
Well,
Oh my
yeah, they're
gosh.
using big words and like, or I just feel like they're talking about something that maybe I don't have as much experience in,
hmm
and I'm like, I'm gonna mess this up,
So
But
that's where you just have to turn on to the, I'm going to see how much you do actually know about this, and I'm going to ask as many questions as I can.
yep, yep.
And that helps you overcome that fear of imposter syndrome because you're telling yourself, I know I don't know as much as you, but I want to, and I'm willing to learn, and I want to see if you're willing to teach. Or are you just somebody who wants to talk about yourself and gloat? Because that's what.
And you're gonna find that out either
Oh
way
yeah,
when you ask
yeah,
that question.
yeah,
And then I
for sure.
also uh highlighted, as I said before, potential is simply hidden ability. And for whatever reason, I'm just having to reiterate that to myself that it's already there. And God has proven that to me time and time again. And that's something that I forget very easily is that like at this point in time with when we started taking students to Belize, that was a dream that came true for me after 10 years of thinking about it. And I remember
The waiting period.
the waiting period, it was a very long waiting room, but I remember having,
Been standing in this line for 10 years.
I really felt that way. And I was like, what is it going to, take? But then even like in the process of putting that course together, and there was a 13-page proposal and multiple levels of approval. And I just thought, God has not let me forget about this since the very first trip, and it's going to happen. So there was a moment after the school bell rang and everybody went to their classroom. This was the first 12 students we ever took. And I just sat down they have like a little picnic table in this small courtyard. So if you've ever been to the Belize school I'm talking about, you know what I'm saying. Um, and I just sat at the picnic table and I was just like completely I didn't, there weren't any emotions coming out. I was just like, I can't believe that this is actually happening.
Is that
Like,
called awe? Like when you
yeah, that would be the
like
word.
awe and you're
Yeah.
just like,
I was just, yeah, flabbergasted, whatever you want to say, but like they were all 12 students. I could hear them teaching. I could hear people doing songs. And like,
if you don't know how you feel, you can look at my emotions wheel real quick and pick one of those
I
words.
felt,
Definitely
oh,
happy
there's
or
so many
surprised.
options. Where are the happy ones? Happy, proud, and peaceful. I'll do that because yeah, that was just wild. And then it just kept getting better because we kept bringing back groups. And I've told you this before too. Whenever like we recruit for even our nonprofit now, I don't recruit. God recruits, and people just come out of the woodwork and they're like, "Hey, I want to go to Belize next summer." I'm like, "Okay, come on, let's go."
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's awesome because yeah, I did. But we needed a mental health professional. So, and like now it's getting like even bigger. But yeah, that's one of those situations where I just have to remind myself that he has shown you time and time again that you already possess what you need. You just need to believe that and like take ownership of it.
and just do the things that help develop that skill. Like imposter syndrome is a good thing. People look at it as if it's like this awful thing. There was a book, I think I want to say Adam Grant is the author. Um, but he talks about how imposter syndrome is what helps keep you humble because you don't know everything. And the scientific mind is somebody who's always thinking in theory. And then you practice something and you do it enough times and it gives you the same result enough times, and then that becomes factual. Like that's how you prove theories. So if you're not trying anything over and over and over and over and over again, that might be a theory that's true that you're never going to discover because you didn't stick with it long enough to even receive the fruit that it can produce. So yes, the imposter syndrome. I want to go into the refining process. I can't, it's almost 8 o'clock already.
You've got 12
I can't
minutes.
believe it. And we still have another chapter to talk about, which is going to be quick. Yeah. But the refining process, I feel like this is like one of, maybe it's just me and my own personal experience, but this was so profound to me that I want to talk about it. Just the example, because I found a scripture verse specifically correlated to this. So he says, the refining process is necessary for turning raw gold nuggets into beautiful pieces of jewelry. AKA, you're a raw gold nugget. That's what I took from that. Like, okay, I'm this raw gold nugget. Or I used to be. I've been through a lot of refining. The gold nuggets are purified by fire. After the metal is heated and refined to a certain level, the gold is identified as 10 karat. But this is one of the lowest levels of refinement because it took the least amount of time in the fire. In order to increase the purity of the gold, and the metal needs to be heated, so in order to increase the purity of the gold, the metal needs to be heated for a longer time. It can be purified into 14 karat, 18 karat, even 24 karat gold. The 24 karat gold is considered pure because it has gone through the most rigorous purification process. It also happens to be the most valuable type of gold. This is because it remained in the fire longer. This process for purifying gold is a good metaphor for what happens in our own lives. Sometimes it feels like God is allowing us to go through the fires of life. Naturally, we don't like it and we want to get out of the fire. Hence, you don't set yourself on fire. We ask God to excuse us from this trial, but God, we don't ask God to excuse us. That's very polite. We're like, make this go. That's really what it kind of sounds like for me. However, he never promised that life would be easy. He did promise to give us strength and to be with us through it all. The refining fires of life have a purpose. They are building us, shaping us, and removing the impurities from our hearts. The more we go through the refining fire, the purer we become. As our purity increases, more value is added to our gift. How beautiful is that? That made me cry when I read it in the book. I have been through, I'm just like at the point where I'm like, oh, I'm going to be real pure one day. I feel like I have been through so many fires that I've been beaten down to feeling like I was just literally nothing. But I spent a lot of that time without God. Yeah. And as soon as I was like, God, if you're real, like you need to prove yourself to me because like I'm done with this life you gave me. If this is the life you gave me, I don't want it. Right. And when I hit my knees, I had an experience and an encounter. Not an audible one, not a visionary, like visual one. There was none of that. There was this peace that came over me in the thickest of the darkest of the most painful hour of my life, where I was like, I'm gonna be okay. And everything after that was this refining period of just like, I don't want to, it was a shit show. My life was, but my behaviors didn't change right away. And that's the one thing where God was like, I don't care what you're doing right now. Just give me your heart and your mind. Right. Give me your time. Right. I will do everything. I just need you to commit your time. Give me your time. And I think for 9 months after that, I read the Bible and I journaled and was reading psychology books and finishing up my psychology degree for like 4 or 5 hours a day.
Wow.
I mean, like rigorous work. So
Yeah.
when I get into this doctorate program where they're like, you have to give us 5 hours of your time, and I'm like, I don't want to do that. I'm like, oh, but I can. I know I
I've
can,
done
Lord. I
it
did it
before.
before, and this is
Yeah,
for you. So
exactly.
make the time work. I
Yeah.
remember asking God, like, I need supernatural sleep tonight because I'm only going to get 6 hours, and you know I don't operate well with less than 8. And I woke up so refined.
Me too.
And I was just like,
Yeah.
refined,
Yeah, there
So
it is.
to me, like, whatever you've been through,
Mhm.
the abuse, the hurt, the pain, the suffering, all of that is refining if you allow God to really take hold of your heart. If you truly, like, for me, it was like, I literally was like, God, I forfeit my free will. Take it back from me and don't
Yeah.
let me make my own choices
Yeah.
for a while. Just lead me and I will follow. I will be obedient. I think my first test was when I went through the 12-day revival at Elevation Church, did this back in 2012 for the new year. And I told God, if you fix everything that's broken in me, or if this is real, like I will commit to going to every single one of those 12 days. And I
Wow.
did. And at first it was like, you showed up and you waited in line for like an hour. By the 12th day, I was showing up 8 hours before the event started to wait in line because that's how busy it was getting.
Wow.
I was in the rain. It was snow. It's January. Keep in mind, we're outside waiting for hours. And I
Mhm.
committed to it. I said, Lord, I'll do this.
Yep.
And it was after that when I had that encounter where he told me I would never be deceived again. And
Mhm.
discernment came like that.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
I had to commit myself. I
Mhm.
made a promise. I followed through with it. I did the hard work. I sacrificed. I was so afraid my boss was going to fire me because I was not doing my job and I would leave early and I'd just go park in the parking lot and try to do as much stuff on the phone that I could. But I was in line and I was committed. I was determined to fix what was broken in my mind.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it did.
Mhm.
And God has answered that prayer and beyond what I could have ever hoped for or expected.
Yeah.
So don't underestimate what God's willing and able to do with your life, regardless of where you're at right now. Go through the purification process. It is totally worth. I'm gonna cry. It is totally worth it. So, um, it is both I and him. So one of the things he wrote in here is you are specific and unique and you carry exactly what someone needs. You are someone's future favorite. So if it seems like people don't prefer what you have to offer right now, don't sweat it. Just
Mhm.
focus on being a blessing to those who are in front of you at the moment. Don't be in a hurry. Your audience is being prepared as you're reading this book.
Mhm.
The truth is, people receive you so much better when they value what you carry. I believe at times God will obscure our greatness from us to motivate us to be more dependent on Him.
Mhm.
He knows that as we truly start to grasp the reality of our own greatness, the temptation to become dependent on ourselves grows. This was one of the things that when I first started down this psychological path, um, for whatever reason, I was reading just Solomon's story, the King Solomon.
Mhm.
And he, when God said, I'll give you anything you ask for, he said,
Mhm.
I want wisdom. He asked for wisdom. And that was the one thing I remember when I was studying. And I said, God, I don't ever want this to become about me.
Yeah.
Like, whatever the work I do, whatever I study, whatever I achieve, like all of that, I need you to be the center and the forefront of it because I know the enemy will just suck me into being in the limelight and it's all about me and I'm so great and yeah, this is what
Mhm.
I don't ever, which is why when I started the foundation I named it the God Foundation, not the Jessica Taylor Conrad whatever foundation. That and obviously my name changes too often. So
The Jessica whatever
this is
foundation.
Jessica whatever. Yeah, so I wanted it to be God's foundation because it is his foundation. Everything that I have become is because of what he has helped me achieve.
Yep.
So, um, pride is what tries to convince us that we can meet all of our own needs independent of direction from or submission to God. This is why God takes us on a journey to fortify our humility and to solidify our allegiance. So I wrote in here, it is both I and him. He is in me. He is also outside of me. It is both. So when I meet people who go on this spiritual journey, I had a conversation with an old friend who it was, I made a comment about Jesus, being the Lord of my life. I posted something and his response was, "You are the Christ."
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, yes, I am one with Christ,
Mm-hmm.
but he is also outside of me. Like
Mm-hmm.
Christ isn't only just within me,
Mm-hmm.
which is what a lot of these spiritual enlightenments want you to believe, that you are the God inside of you. That's all you need,
Mm-hmm.
which is a beautiful thing, right? Like when you think about these cultures who believe this, they're peaceful, they're calm, their emotions don't take over. But for me, when I walked that path, I did those things, the enemy is still coming after you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know your purpose and the direction that God created you, you will get to a point where you feel broken again. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, why did I do this? Why am I even here?
Yeah.
Like, I just committed 20 years of my life to this practice, and boom, one thing happened, I'm rejected, and now who am I? Or somebody dies, and you're like, now who am I? Or you lose a job, now
Mm-hmm.
who am I? Like,
Mm-hmm.
your purpose is so much deeper than you will ever be able to find on your own. And I don't know how to put this like in light terms,
Mm-hmm.
but um you have Christ within you. Absolutely you do. He is one with us, but he's also the authoritative figure in the world. So he's also equally external.
Yeah.
So even though I'm one with God, like I still have to respect that he is bigger than me.
Yeah.
Like to
Mm-hmm.
be so prideful to think that I can just be God inside of myself, like to me that's just
Yeah.
arrogant
Yeah.
because you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And the Holy Spirit and God does know what you don't know that you don't know, and he can help you maneuver in those areas. I don't know if that makes any
It does.
sense.
And it makes me think too, I don't want to be God inside of myself because think of my track record. You know what I mean? Like I know that he has so many more things to offer that I am not ready to see or experience or understand yet. And like there's what is the point of missing out on that or trying to be it just doesn't work. I don't know. I just feel like because we don't understand. We understand God one way, but it is much bigger than we can ever um, comprehend. And that's what the Bible says too, is that like God's ways are not our ways. And when he gives you, and we haven't got to that chapter yet, I'm waiting on that, but
Well, so kind of even going off what you just said, like my relationship with you is based upon our time and experiences together.
mhm,
Your relationship with your husband is going to be vastly different than it is with me. So like if we think about that in terms of like our relationship with God, like my relationship with God is going to look different than yours.
right.
And it's going to look different than all of the other billions of people who have that relationship.
Hmm.
So only he is all knowing and can fulfill that role.
Yeah.
So when I meet somebody who's struggling and I give them a prophetic word that I'm like, I've had clients tell me all the time, they're like, oh my gosh, what you just said, like that just speaks to my heart. Like, can you repeat it? Excuse me. And I'm like, nope.
No. It's gone.
Nope, I don't think I can. I was like, because I think that was what God needed you to hear.
Hmm.
It wasn't me telling you this. Like,
Yeah.
um, but I'm very in tune with, praying over my clients, and I'm asking God, like, bring me the people who want to hear from you. Now, do I work with clients who don't believe in God? Absolutely.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, and they teach me so much, and I love that, about those relationship dynamics. But God's still using me to
Yeah.
to get to them.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to just dismiss him and say, well, because you don't believe in God, then that's not going to be a part of, like, that is me,
Hmm.
and I don't hide that from myself, but I want my clients to know, like, I don't have all the answers. I had one client asked me, she's like, "Are you just Googling stuff when we're like in session together?" And I'm like, "Yeah, what do you think? I'm like just a vault of every answer in the book." I said, "I'm researching this. I'll send you like 5 or 6 articles,
Yeah.
different perspectives, read through them, take what you can from it and apply it to your life and see how it goes. But here's some information on that. Here's some coping skills. Here's a different, so it's just,
Professors do that too.
yeah,
So
like I don't have all the
no.
answers. And
I'm not going to pretend like
counsel,
I do.
well, and yeah, and I'm not going to pretend, but therapy isn't just about listening and asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
People come to me because they genuinely want to understand something. And if I have the tools and the access to that information, of course I'm going to share it with you. Like, read this, see how that helps.
Yeah.
So I'm
So
not a traditional therapist either. I should watch what I say on this.
actually, I think that's refreshing.
So anyways, chapter 7, no small thinkers allowed. So what were you gonna say? I didn't start highlighting until
nothing.
page 122.
Okay, well, this is getting kind of creepy. I did the same thing. Page 122. All right, yeah, and basically
I
the
started a
same
little bit higher.
section.
People may
Okay,
think small, but God does not.
so I'll just start up there. People may think small, but God does not. His thoughts are unlimited in extent, and this is what we were just saying. His plans are eternal in scope. So the plans he has for us are big, just like he is. He wants us to be courageous enough to accept his thoughts for us. He wants us to go after big dreams. All too often, we shrink the dream down to the size that we think we can receive. We scale it down to the equivalent of our perceived significance, and that's a size that's comfortable enough for us to navigate without the assistance of divine intervention or personal maturity. And I believe God will allow certain situations to happen in our lives to serve as a catalyst in cultivating our courage and our faith.
Yes.
I love that.
So think big. What you can do in the natural, God can do in the supernatural. And I love that. Like, we are ordinary people, and God is what helps us be extraordinary. Extraordinary.
Amen to that. Amen to that.
When I say it as an extraordinary, I'm like, does that make us like even less ordinary?
Does it make us extra?
So we serve a supernatural God who has designed us to think like him because we are fashioned after him. It is now our responsibility to think on God's level because that's the type of thinking that pleases him. A decision about how you think will always lead to a change in how you experience life. So this is the part I want you to take away. A decision about how you think will always lead to a change in how you experience life. This faith level thinking. So faith is believing that God is who he says he is, and in his word that he is going to do for you what he said he would do for you. Mm-hmm. Faith is being divinely persuaded that the dream he has given you was given to the right person and will be manifested in this earth with his help. This is not just your opportunity, it's your responsibility. Mm. As scripture says, without faith, it is impossible to please him. Mm-hmm. So you can go do whatever you think you're good at without God, but I guarantee you it's not going to be as good as it would be if it was with God. Mm-hmm. So
and it may not work out. That's been my experience too, is when I'm like, I got this,
yeah.
And that was prior to me relying on God full time. Spoiler alert, I didn't, and it came crashing down a lot.
My mom has that sign up there that says, if your dreams don't scare you, they're not big enough. So when you get a thought, a vision, a calling, and you're like, there is no way I will ever achieve that. Like, that's where you're supposed to go.
Yep.
I would say stay to that, stay on that path. But
so before we sign off, I want to do the thing I keep referencing. I'm like, we're gonna get to that. Was the story of a man who he met. It was like, I don't know if this guy was a king or like some sort of a high ranking position somewhere within the world. Okay.
Are you talking about Joseph or no?
Well, it's based on the Joseph passage, but this was a more, I think it's out of we are also reading a leadership devotional. I think this is what this came from. But it's about a man who, a series of favors for a high ranking person, and the king, I think it was a king, and he said, how can I repay you? Please tell me what it is that I can do for you. And he said, all I want is a golf club, just a golf club. And this man was insistent. The king was insistent. The man was uncomfortable. He's like, I really don't want anything, but he's like, no, I need you to tell me. And so then several weeks went by, and there was no golf club that came in the mail or anything.
And he's getting all butt hurt because he's not. Well, the king said he was going to send me a golf club.
Like he was insisting that I tell him what I want, and then he didn't, pay up. So then one day, one of his officials comes to the front door with an envelope and says, "Is this your name? Are you this person?" And he says, "Yes." And he handed over the deed to an actual golf club.
The whole golf club.
And that just blew my mind because it's, that's an example of God being like, okay, well, I know that you've asked for this thing, but I'm going to give you
think small, I think big.
Right. That'll be part of it, but it's not the end of it. So
vision casting, great thing, creating a vision board, all the different things that you want to accomplish in life. So vision boards are a good starting point. You see the thing what we see repetitively. So if you want to memorize something or you want to remember something, put it on a sticky note and post it all over your house.
Mm-hmm.
Put it on the mirror in your bathroom. Every time you walk past it, read it.
Mm-hmm.
The more you read it, the more you're going to retain it, the more it's become a habitual practice. You're not going to ever have to think about it again. And what's so cool about that is your brain, regardless of all the information you've learned in your life, when you're in a situation where you need to know that piece of information, your brain will pull it out for you because you have it memorized.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that you memorize, your brain will remember when you need it to remember.
Yep.
The Holy Spirit is to bring all things that were forgotten into remembrance.
So that's been happening.
We also have that.
Yeah.
But memorize it. Post it around every time. When you see things often, I don't remember if I mentioned this in here, but we talked about this. So this is how your brain works. The longer you stare at something, your brain will eventually make that thing invisible because it's constantly there. Mm-hmm. So it'll see right through it and pretend it doesn't exist anymore. So when you see things and you kind of don't pay attention to really what's going on around you because it's always in the same spot, your Post-it notes will be the same way. Mm-hmm. You'll see them, you'll read them the first couple of times, but after a while, you'll just it's kind of like notifications on your phone. You just kind of swipe them by. When you take and make the intention of every time you see that sticky note, you stop and you read it out loud, that's what's going to build this practice because you'll do this in other areas of your life as well. So just keep that in mind. I don't know, we can close. It's so late already. I'll let everybody go. As your greatness is revealed, God is glorified. The scripture says that God will fulfill his purpose for me. The good news is that God does the supernatural work. We just have to obey him. God is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think, according to his power that works in us. The power to do whatever you were born to do is already on the inside of you. As your greatness is revealed, God is glorified. No dream can survive a person who quits. Don't walk away from the dream that is inside of you, because only your perseverance can make that dream a reality. What God is going to do through you will benefit many people in society. We need what you carry. We need it more now than perhaps any other time in history. The book of Proverbs tells us that if we work hard, we will become leaders in the areas God has called us to be. No greatness happens without work. Ultimately, it's not just about the dream. It's about the person you become as a result of pursuing the dream. Mm-hmm. Just as humankind could not thrive without mothers giving birth to new babies every day, society needs you to give birth to your purpose, your assignment, and your dream through your unique personality. So
that's an awesome way to end it. Should probably close in a prayer.
Okay, go ahead. You do that.
Okay. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for the opportunity to discuss these chapters, discuss this book. We thank you for all of the revelations that even just in the little bit of time that we've been spending here, that we have been pulling out, some big reflections and big learning experiences,
Hmm.
but also that we know that you are teaching us and preparing us for bigger things. And we are humbled and grateful. And we thank you for those who are watching and asking questions. And we pray that you will help us to reach more people in the same way. And we look forward to seeing where this goes. In Jesus'
Amen.
name, amen.